When you design a life of what I call your winning life, when you activate that, what I like to think about is running decisions through a filter of, does this help me win? Let's think about who we want to be, how we want to show up as leading by example for the most important people in your life. And that's how you do it. So taking action and really getting clear on who you are and making the most of your potential. Win the day, the origins of that came from something that I heard Napoleon Hill say. He said that the poverty conscience will automatically overtake any mind that is not preoccupied with being success conscious. If your mind isn't already filled with success, it's going to be overtaken like a cancer by poverty and all of the other things that come across with that. I need to fill my mind with success and successful thoughts and have successful people around me and people who align, not contradict with my values. Make the decision to win, or you've automatically made the decision to lose.
I'm very grateful to have James here today with me today. Thanks for joining me.
Scott, thanks so much for having me.
You made a career shift and a change in your life. And I think a lot of people that listen to this, high performers have a tendency, and I designate high performers as anybody doing the utmost that they can do in every day. Moms that are working at home and out in the workforce, dads that are coming home from their long day and going to soccer practice at baseball, and business entrepreneurs, all kinds of people are really in this category. But so many of them don't follow their dreams. They do the same thing. They get in a rut. And your story is one where you really made a decision, a clear-cut decision to follow your dreams. Tell our listeners a little bit about that story, just because I think it's such a cool vibe.
Yeah, well, honestly, I feel like I've gone through so many different periods of rebirth in life. It's just what happens. There's a friend of mine, Dr. Jeff Spencer, and he talks about this idea that all of us are different people every 10 years, especially if you're a man. It's just what happens. Every 10 years, we're different people. So if your wife seems that you feel like a bit of a different person, well, it's probably because of the different evolutions that we have gone through. So I spent more than 10 years back in the financial planning world, and I love that. I love the industry and everything else, all the great people, the clients we had. I eventually was managing an advisor team of more than 30 financial advisors for a company with more than $2 billion under management in Australia. And I just reached a point where my primary challenge was time. I wasn't really growing as much anymore. It was just how much more work could I get done in the day? And if, anyone who's worked in the corporate world, or even really as an entrepreneur, you realize that there's always more work. It's a really powerful lesson. There is always more work. So I had this drive deep down that I always wanted to go and study an MBA over in America. And that's what I did. I moved over to America and studied an MBA. And then I was involved in a whole bunch of different entrepreneurial pursuits from there. And then I was able to get involved with the Napoleon Hill Foundation, who, Napoleon Hill wrote books like Think and Grow Rich, the best-selling self-help book of all time. So I wrote a modern version of that called Think and Grow Rich, The Legacy. And I know you're really big on living your legacy. It's really, really important to me that legacy is not something we leave behind. It's something that we build for the present, for the people who depend on us most. And I became executive producer of a film made about Think and Grow Rich for the first time ever. And then I had a bit of an interesting situation a couple of years ago. We have 2 young children, and when our boy was born, our second born, he just had a couple of health challenges, and he's all fine now. But I realized that I was spread so thin in my life because of all these different businesses that I was involved in, that I was living a very stressful life. I was living a life that was taking energy from me. And I should have known better from the interviews that I've done with people like Rob Dyrdek, that you need to build a life that gives you energy. So I took a step back from all of the different things that I was involved in. I told my business partners that all this stuff is yours. I need to create some space to be there for my family. And during that process, I had a couple of non-negotiables for what I wanted to do for that next phase. So after shoring up my family, the very first non-negotiable was, I'm done chopping and changing. I want to do one thing for the rest of my life. And the second non-negotiable was that I want to be the best in the world at it. Now, does it really matter if I attain being the best in the world? It's really the pursuit. It's a bit like purpose, having something driving you forward to get up and win the day every single day. And I realized that I had this thing called Win the Day that was this podcast that at the time was a passion project for about 3.5 years. And I went all in on win the day. My purpose had been staring at me right in the face without me even realizing it. So now I'm 2 years into the win the day journey, and it's such a powerful lesson in concentrated effort when all of these different things come for you. I've now created these assessment tools and business things, working with everyone from high growth startups right through to Fortune 100 companies, and I'm just so grateful to have the life I have today. I know that's a bit of a long winded answer, but I'm very passionate about concentrated effort and finding what you love.
I think it's a great answer. And I think what's interesting is I found myself in the financial world not because of something I always dreamed of. People will be like, "Oh, you love what you do." I always found passion in anything I was doing. And the interesting thing is that you wake up one day and you're like, "Wait, I love what I'm doing, but I love the result of what I'm doing. I love how I can provide for my family. I love how I can help people every day." The other thing that's always interesting to me about podcasting is you in this industry, you've had so many conversations with people that are difficult. They come in and they open up to you about the very thing that they're so uncomfortable about, which is money. And it's always kind of given you an insight into their lives, into their relationships, into what they value, or what they don't value. And so I think it's so interesting that you came to that conclusion at a pretty important time. And now your children are how old right now?
5 and 2.5 now. So
Okay.
still in the thick of it a little bit. It's given me all of my gray hair, but it's great. I love being a parent.
I have an 18-year-old in college right now and a 15-year-old. And so two boys. And I can tell you that the perspective of looking back on time is so powerful. There's so many things that you take for granted. It's natural, right? It's not something you have to beat yourself up over, but the nights where you're tired because the 2-year-old's been in and out of your bed half the night, and then the 5-year-old wakes up 2 days later and you're like, "Oh my gosh, am I ever gonna sleep again?" And
Yeah.
I'm sure it happens all the time, and it's just part of it, right? But you look back and you miss that, and now
Yeah.
it's crazy.
So I do a morning journal. So every morning I use something called the Day One app, which is pretty cool because it sounds a lot like Win the Day. It's the Day One ONE, and it's incredible. I've been doing that now for 3.5 years, every single day. So even this morning, I always have a bit of a template that I use in there, which I'm happy to run you through. So the template that I have for that is like, what's unique about the last 24 hours? Like, how did we spend our time? And then what am I feeling grateful for? Not what am I thinking grateful for? What am I feeling grateful for? And then what are 3 things that I'm going to do today that will make today a win? And then I'll include a lesson if there is one. And then I'll also include intentional breath, just 5 deep breaths, because it's so rare that people have that time for a bit of intentional breath in their day. And what I realized just every single day, I'm just blown away. But I wrote down, what am I feeling gratitude for this morning? Was for being consistent with that journal practice, because to see where your energy is being allocated, and memories, particularly if you've got kids, that it's not just your kids getting older, you're also getting older. And there's no time to waste in terms of creating the life that you want, that gives you energy and brings more energy back into the household. If you're coming back home at the end of the day and you don't take a moment to really recalibrate of what type of energy do I want to bring into this situation, and what type of outcome do I want from being with my family, the most important people who depend on me, like when you design a life of what I call your winning life, when you activate that, what I like to think about is running decisions through a filter of, does this help me win? So before you're met with a decision, like even if you're about to walk into the house, of just like, what type of energy do I want to bring into the house? And you might be feeling a bit irritable or stressed from the day. And you can say, cool, does this help me win? If the answer is no, okay, cool. Let's have 60 seconds, a bit of intentional breath. Let's think about who we want to be, how we want to show up as leading by example for the most important people in your life. And that's how you do it. But I mean, I'm the first to admit that it doesn't always work for me, because we have those days when, life gets in the way and you're just a bit tired. But it's nice to have the intention of being able to do that, so we can show up as our best self and as our intentional self a bit more often.
Yeah, the energy is so powerful when you have young kids in the house because it's almost like it's running without you even being a part of it. There's those days where you walk in and the energy is just there. And you really recognize that our kids are both out of the house now. Our 15-year-old lives out of town at an academy playing soccer. And so we are empty nesters, but not really supposed to be. And so the energy in the house is gone. And so we come in and we're like, we're better friends. we're more connected. We're planning out trips to go see the boys and to do different things. But the energy that just ran without us is all of a sudden something we're responsible for creating. So, exactly what you're saying is so powerful. All the more reason to be more intentional about your days, because now we have to think about it a little bit more because it's not just happening around us.
Yeah, and I saw this morning, I was walking down the stairs holding my 2-year-old's hand. He was dressed in a Spider-Man outfit. He just loves everything to do with Spider-Man. And his fingers are, just of course, dirtying up the wall at that exact height. And I looked over and I was like, I am so grateful for that dirty wall. I love seeing the fingerprints of the kids just on there because it's them growing up, and it's something I don't think I'll ever clean up and wash. I feel like my wife might have a different perspective on that, but yeah, it's amazing to experience life through the eyes of kids.
Yeah, I walked. My nephew is 4. One of my nieces has a baby, and I he came over yesterday. He's starting a new school today, and so he comes over, and we went for a walk, a couple mile walk with my dog, and we're. I'm thinking, okay, we're gonna walk a couple miles. I got to keep him focused. We're walking through the ponds. We get to the second pond, and he goes, "Hey, Uncle Scott, can we just stop and sit down right here?" And I'm like, "Well, we still have one more pond to get to." I'm going through the motions. Like, I'm like, "We gotta get through." He goes, "Uncle Scott, sometimes I just like to lay in the grass." And,
Mm.
you sit down and you let that 4-year-old completely change your entire perspective of the day. We see a little rainbow in the water. You see, what's your favorite animal? These are conversations I haven't had in a long time. And so it's just so nice and refreshing. So the hands on the wall are okay because they do provide that imprint into, something that's way more powerful than the paint.
Yeah, the goal of parents to try and convince children how the world is. I think we got to do a better job at listening to our kids and just being present with them, like you mentioned.
Yeah, well, we're all doing the best that we can and it's not always easy. And I think I'm much better at 46 than I was. I had kids early. So, you get the earlier version, the less impressive version of yourself in some ways, and a very impressive version in others. My boys got to see me hungry and fighting and playing
Mm.
sports and aggressive, and but they didn't see the calmer, retrospective, thinking version. It was a lot of the reacting version. And sometimes, you're there are great things about all ages, but you're really trying to be the best. And you had kids a little later, you say,
Yeah.
so it gives you a different perspective into how you raise them.
Yeah, I'm 41 years old now. It's interesting. I feel like I was a bit of a late bloomer in like every part of my life. Like I was always envious of the people in high school who seemed to be like, hey, I want to be a doctor or whatever, or an athlete or whatever they want to do. Of like, hey, I'm just going to follow this one straight path. Mine has been this crazy ups and downs the entire way through. Like my older brother has had the same job in corporate finance for 20 years, and I'm like, wow, what a really stable, peaceful life. Although he does have 7 kids now, so
Wow.
it's a bit more full on for him. But I've just been a bit of a late bloomer in all of those different things, and I'm okay with that. It's been great, and I think that's a good lesson, particularly in the world of mental health, that some people just take a little bit longer to bloom than others. It took me a little bit longer to bloom, and I'm really happy where I am now.
Isn't it funny how we're all right where we're supposed to be? No matter
Yes,
where you're
exactly.
at, you're sitting right where you're supposed to be. I was supposed
Yeah.
to have kids early and go through the
Mm.
process, and you were right on target with exactly when because now you're sitting and watching your kids dirty up the wall, but you have the perspective to say, it doesn't matter because this
Yeah.
is why I'm here.
Yeah.
When when you're teaching the win the day strategy and you're helping people, a lot of people are driving in their cars listening to this thinking, there's something I've always wanted to do. How does this strategy help them shape that next decision, that hard decision in their lives of maybe making a change or an adjustment in their career, their life, whatever it is that they're going through?
Yeah, I think it's important to look at this whether is this just an experience that you want to go and have the thrill of doing, or is this something that you really want to commit to? So the first thing that I feel like people need to do is connect with what I call wonder. So the people who are disconnected from wonder, they're the ones who they don't know who they are and they don't know where they want to go. So the ways to tackle that, this is what I do with the clients that I work with. We say, cool, we got to get to know who you are. So the way that we do that is to look at what I call winning traits, but you could also look at it in terms of values or the core values that drive you. So for me, the core values that drive me growth. I need to be growing. I need the people around me to be growing. And if that happens, that's really, really good. Connection is my second one. So I need to be connected with who I am. I need other people around me. I need to be deeply connected with them. I need them to be deeply connected with impact rather than watching TV and just wasting their lives. And the third one is integrity. I need people around me who are acting with integrity and really living that. And on the conditions that I have connection, growth, integrity in my life, then I'm great. Everything in my life is really, really good. So if you know what your winning traits are, and if you don't know what your winning traits are, I'm happy to go through a bit of an exercise that can help people get a bit of clarity on that. Write down 3 people. If you're driving, maybe pull over to the side of the road while you do this. Write down the names of 3 people who you know personally, who you respect and you admire. So one of them might be a spouse, maybe a best friend, and maybe a work colleague. So 3 people that you write down. And then you write down 3 people who you don't know personally, who you respect and admire. Maybe an athlete, maybe someone entertainment, maybe a business visionary or business leader or entrepreneur or historical figure. So you're left with 6 people. You've got 3 people who you know, 3 people who you don't know, and you respect and admire all of those 6 people. And then on the next column, you write down exactly what it is that you respect and admire about them. So what are their attributes or their skills or their values? Write them down. And what you do next after that is you put your hand over the names of the people and you read out those values, especially the ones that are repeated more than once, like the most frequent ones. And there's a very, very, very good chance that those are your winning traits, your core values. And once you're clear on that, that's when we can say, cool, what is my life's purpose? What am I here for? And then we say, awesome, life purpose. And then we say professional purpose here. How do we line them up so your life's purpose becomes your professional purpose? Everything is serving as one. And every action that you take in your life is then one that gives you energy rather than taking it away because you're serving the bigger mission. And then you find goals that are really just markers on the path at that point to show that you're living in alignment with that purpose and in that life. And that's it. That's really it. That's how you connect with wonder. And that's really the first piece. I have these 2 other big pieces in what I call the win method. But for those who are low on motivation or they're not clear on what that next step needs to be, that's where I would start. Now, there's one other thing to add for that. If there's someone who wants to get to that next level and they need a skill to be able to get there, maybe they want to be recognized as more of an authority in their industry, that's a bit different because it's not so much being connected with wonder. At that point, you need to say, cool, well, who do I need to become to enjoy those results? And that can be, okay, cool. If I want to go and do a TED Talk that gets me 1 million views, what do I need? First of all, is I need a venue. I need a TED Talk event that I can be confirmed for. Then I need a coach. I need a coach to be able to help me with storytelling. I need to be a great student. I need to go and look at the 10 or 20 best TED Talks that were ever done and be a great student to find out what were the commonalities that each of those presentations had that I can use and learn from to interpret in my own way for my speech. Then I need to practice and get feedback. And on the condition that you do all of those different things, you give yourself the best chance of success at that TED Talk, then you can become an authority in your industry through developing that skill. And there's a good friend of mine who wanted to do a TED Talk. It was his dream, and he put it in the email signature. So every single time that he would send an email, it said, my dream is to do a TED Talk. If you know of someone who could help make this happen, I'd greatly appreciate an introduction. And eventually it happened, and that led to a second TED Talk. That's got more than 5 million views and has transformed his life more than anything else possibly could have.
It's amazing how when you put something out into the universe, how valuable it can be and how vulnerable it makes you, but it also puts you in a position where people can help you. I think so many people have this struggle inwardly that they're afraid to share these parts of themselves. And I found that I will tell people something, or you find yourself telling someone something that you haven't even vocalized before. And you're like, wow, that sounds like me. That is me. That's so true. And then someone's like, oh, I know this person. We should totally have a conversation. That's amazing. And it's so valuable what you're saying. I love that whole concept, just because you're building something out there, and then you're going to see the version of yourself that you want to be.
Yeah, and really flipping the switch on, do the people in my network want to help me or not? Like, are they there to help me or are they there to harm me? And I guarantee you that they're there to help you. But if they don't know what you want, then they can't help you and they won't. So you being clear on who you are and where you want to go, declaring those intentions. You don't need to do it publicly. You don't need to go and announce on your Facebook page that, look, I'm going to lose 50 pounds in the next year and everything's going to be great. And I'm going to sign a Sports Illustrated cover agreement at the end of all of that stuff. You can, in private conversations, and this is something that I love to do, is to say, look, I'm working on this big thing right now. I would just love your feedback because I value our friendship so much. If you've got 30 minutes, I'd love to be able to take you out for a coffee and we can brainstorm. So with this new business venture that I've been building in the last couple of years, I've been going over to my friends' houses who have also got young kids. So I put my kids to bed, they put their kids to bed. I go to the house at 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. I'm tired. They're super tired. I'm sure the last thing that they want to do is have me come over there and talk about this thing, but I know that they want to help me. So I'm like, cool, let me call up those favors in times of need in particular and get that done. And it's really strengthened the overall projects that I have and everything else.
Did you go through this exact process when you were building the Win the Day podcast and you said, hey, it's staring me right in front of my face. It sounded like you laid out grow, connect, and you were considering your impact and integrity. These are the things that were probably in line with how you built that out. Is that a good assessment?
It's so interesting that I've done that for basically everything in my life, but for the podcast and that phase, I don't think it was. So,
Okay.
which is weird, and because it probably should have been, and maybe I would have arrived at it a little bit earlier if I had have gone through that exercise. This was a process of intuition. I was lying in bed one night, and a question popped up in my head without me even consciously being aware of it. And it said, is your involvement in this particular business strengthening you or weakening you? And before I had a chance to even process the question, the answer came in and said, weakening you. And I was like, wow, this is really, really interesting. And then the next question said, is this your path? And the answer was no. And I was like, wow, this is really, really weird, this intuition. And I'm 41 years old now. It's taken me a long time to go all in on trusting my intuition, but I have that now. So I had these different things going on that were pushing me to make the decision to jump out of the plane of these other things that I was involved in. So there I was falling, being like, cool, I've sort of retired at like 40 years old at that point or 39 years old at that point. What am I going to do from here? But I had the intuition that I was heading in the right direction. And then because a podcast really is the best education. Like I've done education to some pretty high levels. I have a master's degree in business and bachelor degrees and all of these different things. There is no education like having a podcast where you can sit down and have conversations like this and, ask any question that you want from really successful people. And there was one guy I interviewed who's become a really good friend of mine. His name is Michael Fox, and he has a business called Fable Food Co. And what Michael did was his biggest business was a company called Shoes of Prey. And he had two business partners, and it was the first women's custom shoe company ever created. So if you're a woman and you want a new pair of fancy shoes, you would go online and you would create your own shoes, design them however you want, and they would be delivered to your door. And the business was doing really, really well. They raised more than $30 million. They partnered with Nordstrom. And then eventually they ended up, the business went under. It just didn't reach their profitability targets and it just slowly faded away. And that's what can happen, even though from the outside looking in, you have a lot of these things going on. So Michael lost the business. He lost his marriage because his wife was one of the business partners in that venture. So in his mid-30s, he didn't have any money. He'd lost all of these different things, even though his life should have been a mega success at that point. And he said to me, and I'll never ever forget this, he said, when I came home from work, I wasn't reading magazines about women's shoes. And I thought that was so interesting. My whole life is Win the Day. Everything that in my downtime, I'm watching videos on Win the Day. I'm writing things on Win the Day. I'm reading things on Win the Day. It's everything that I do. All of the conversations that I have are about Win the Day. And his new company, Fable Food Co., is a meat alternative product. So it uses shiitake mushrooms to replicate like ground beef and steak and these different things. And he's partnered with people like Heston Blumenthal, one of the most highly regarded chefs of all time, and is launched now in dozens and dozens of countries. He's been on that show Down to Earth with Zac Efron. He's absolutely crushing it because in his downtime, he loves reading and doing research about this industry.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's amazing how when you find that passion for what you actually love doing, where you could see all of it just come together in life. And so the podcast, if you think about it, the podcast gives you constant growth, constant constant connection, and then the integrity. It was already embedded. You didn't have to go through the process because it does it already.
Yeah, for sure. And really what I love so much about the podcast is for various projects before that, when I had interviewed people, what I realized is that I wanted to get access to successful people more often because I just felt so motivated leaving their presence. But if you're interviewing them once, especially if it's remote for like a book project, it can be very, very difficult. But like these people I interviewed, like Barbara Corcoran, Rob Dyrdek, Bob Proctor, a lot of them were in person, but it's very difficult to maintain a friendship with people who are at the absolute top of their game. And I was sort of emerging, so I didn't really have as much value to be able to offer them. Now things have changed because we've moved on a little bit and I've had success in these different fields that it would be a lot easier to be able to do that. And now I do have a lot of great friendships with a lot of those people. But at the start, I was like, I need to get access to those people more often. So then the second part of that was I didn't want it to be a fleeting encounter. I wanted to become friends with them. And then the third one was, how do I build my own brand in the process? And all of those things, that's exactly what the podcast was so good for. I could interview these amazing people that forced me to do research beforehand. So they would know how much I valued them and their expertise because of the preparation that I did beforehand, which made me so much smarter in the whole process. And then because of that and the video assets that I provided, I was able to maintain an ongoing friendship with them. I would think about who are the people in my network that would be a good fit for them and how can I go above and beyond for their mission, not for my mission, but for their mission. And then through that process, investing in a videographer who's amazing. I've got a really great video guy. And I invest a lot of money in the video assets that come from the podcast. I've been able to really build my brand very, very quickly to have that omnipresence through the world, which has now led to a platform where a lot of these high profile people, now I'm the prize, when at the start I initially had to reach out to go and find these people to come on my show. So I'm able to make up the money that I spend in podcast production through building a brand that attracts speaker opportunities and all of those different things. And that doesn't even factor in relationship capital, which is 1,000 times more in terms of ROI. Just the people that I'm now friends with and can call favors on, just those people has been a massive, massive ROI from having a podcast.
It's interesting because since I started the podcast and we're about a year and a half in, I think we've done launched about 75 episodes. And people will say, hey, what's your favorite podcast? And I can never remember. I can never answer the question because I enjoy every single conversation so much. And the connection of being right there with that guest when you're having that conversation is so powerful that there's things that you're gaining out of it, or even friendships that you're gaining where afterwards someone's texting you and saying, hey, when you're in New York, we got to try this Italian restaurant together. Or next time you're in LA, make sure you call me. I really had a great time. And I feel like that's the special part of the podcast that maybe not everybody sees. Is not just about interviewing amazing people. It's also about connecting to somebody that has like-minded thoughts and can share ideas, and knowing that you're helping people, because that person driving in the car, listening to how they can win the day, how they can make a change, is actually going to remember this conversation, something that we created and cultivated for them.
Yeah, 100%. And the reason I do Win the Day is because I want to learn about this stuff. Just like the reason you do your podcast is because you're interested in this stuff as well. Like, have you heard the expression, we teach what we need to know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true, right? Like I just as I'm teaching people about Win the Day, I need to know more and more and more about that. And the most valuable piece of real estate I own is from outside of the podcast studio to the parking lot where I have conversations with the guests where I walk them back to the car. The amount of opportunities that has led to. I once did a Zoom recording many years ago with someone who created a $100 million a year food business within 3 years, which is crazy. And at the end of it, she said, I love your energy. I'm taking you out to lunch. And then, a couple of weeks later, we went out for lunch and she's become a great friend. So yeah, you have no idea what ROI can come from having a podcast before anyone even hears the episode.
Yeah. And if you think about it, look at how in this current election environment, how powerful the podcasting platform has become. It's really interesting. You see both candidates in the United States going on podcasts, on very popular podcasts, on comedy podcasts, on girl podcasts. I mean, you name it. I mean, from Call Her Daddy to Andrew Schultz to, Theo Vaughn.
Theo
I mean,
Von.
it's unreal. I mean, and they're phenomenal interviews. They're just
Yeah.
phenomenal. And it's showing that this is a very, very valuable space for the
Yeah.
future.
100%. I think it's going to disrupt a lot of the mainstream media things that have really played a big role in determining, all around the world from either side of the aisle. This stuff just depends on the outlet. I love the idea of longer free-form conversations, going back to the general public. Let's get out there and have as many conversations as we can. Just because someone disagrees with you politically doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It means that they had different relationships and experiences than you did. So what's the way to really bring us all together and have that unity? Is to ask questions, to find out how they came up with those opinions. And hopefully, if you're with someone of integrity, they will ask questions back and you can have a great conversation and still be friends, even if you disagree vehemently.
Yeah, I'm a big soccer fan, and I promise this will come back around for you listening. But in the game of soccer, there was so much that people will say there was more creativity in years past, and today so many of the players play robotically. They play their positions. The six does this, the eight does that, the 10, the true 10 that plays in the midfield and creates the Messi style player just is very hard to find. And I think to your point, you use the word wonder. And I love that curiosity, that wonder. When you look at journalism and we look at the mainstream media and we look at all the typical outlets, there's such a lack of stretching and stepping outside the zone of what's expected. So whereas the more people that do that, the more we're like, oh, you know who I love? I love it when Joe Rogan asks these questions and you can't tell where Joe lies on an issue. Now, maybe lately you could see a little more, but it's so different for the years of listening and curiosity. And I think that creativity is something that if you do it too often, sometimes it gets into this box and you have to
Mm.
break free from the box again.
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
I see it happening. Tell me, I'm curious about this. So you got to work with Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich projects, and that had to be an amazing experience because I know just reading that book for the first time many, many years ago, it was an eye-opening experience. I mean, it was something where you're looking at things that all these people that built the country were doing, and they had these similarities. And there's such a powerful message. What was it like to have the experience of kind of being not only aligned with the book and the messaging, but working within the Napoleon Hill Foundation?
Yeah, it's been a bit beyond my imagination, to be honest. I've actually got this sitting. If you're watching this on video, I've got Napoleon Hill's greatest speeches sitting right in front of me because I'm about to go and do the keynote at Napoleon Hill Day for the foundation at the University of Virginia next week. It was amazing. It was beyond amazing. Just being involved in that, it just defies belief from where I grew up. Like I grew up in the third biggest city in Australia, which is like a 14-hour flight from LA, where I live now. Like I always feel like I have no right to be involved in all of these different things. And through my darkest moments when I was growing up, in my rock bottom moment, just as I was coming out of that, I found resources like Success Magazine, which is really the preeminent personal help magazine of all time. And I do so much work with Success Magazine today. I started listening to Jim Rohn, and Jim Rohn's two biggest influences were the Bible and Think and Grow Rich. And through Jim Rohn, I found my way back to Napoleon Hill and all of his teachings, and have been involved through the source from Napoleon Hill, which is Andrew Carnegie, and so many other things. So I've written 2 books now with the Napoleon Hill Foundation, translated into more than 15 languages. It's in German, Czech, Japanese, Portuguese, Spanish, and so many different languages that I can't even read, but it's pretty cool to see the book being released there. But a lot of people have cannibalized that brand since Think and Grow Rich in particular was released in 1937. It came out within 1 year of another all-time personal development classic being How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, another one of my favorites. A lot of people have really bastardized that Think and Grow Rich brand. It is such a powerful brand. The word action is the most important thing. When we talk about rich, we're not talking about monetary wealth. Yes, it's great to be financially free because the more financial resources you have, the more you can contribute to the people and the causes that you care about. But money and the love of money can be really, really evil. So taking action and really getting clear on who you are and making the most of your potential. Win the Day, the origins of that came from something that I heard Napoleon Hill say. He said that the poverty conscience will automatically overtake any mind that is not preoccupied with being success conscious. And I was just blown away when I read that. And I thought, hang on, if your mind isn't already filled with success, it's going to be overtaken like a cancer by poverty and all of the other things that come across with that. I was like, wow, that's interesting. I need to fill my mind with success and successful thoughts and have successful people around me and people who align, not contradict with my values. And I needed a way for people to understand the essence of what that was at a daily level. And the way that I interpreted that was make the decision to win, or you've automatically made the decision to lose. And that is where Win the Day came from.
That's awesome. So not only has it been a great experience in your life, but it also helped you find the path that was the right path as you asked yourself that question.
It was like I never in a million years thought that I would be involved in I guess what is technically the personal development, self help world. And there are a lot of people in that industry that I don't necessarily gravitate towards, particularly the ones that have got very lavish showings of material possessions and these different brands. It's an immediate off for me whenever I see that. I'm just like, why wouldn't you? You know, what do you need some $10,000 or $20,000 handbag for? One of the most vivid memories I have is when I was in my early 20s and I went to a corporate luncheon, and the nonprofit they were supporting was called the Hear and Say Centre from Brisbane in Australia. And there was a girl who got up there. She was 12 years old, and she was given a cochlear implant, and she was born deaf, which means she couldn't speak. And I can't imagine as a parent having a kid who couldn't hear and can't speak. It's honestly, it's almost bringing me to tears thinking about it. And she went and got the implant, and 4 years later, she's doing the speech at this luncheon, and there was not a dry eye in the room. So when I see things like these lavish shows of material wealth, I'm like, just expand your horizons a little bit and find out about some of the pain that's out there in the world, and think about how well you could properly allocate some of those resources.
It's really funny to that point. When I was in the financial advisory world and I started to actually do well, I I co-founded a wine festival for charity with an uncle of mine, and we started building it out. And first year, $175,000 to local charities. And at the time, there was no way I could write a check for $175,000. And I thought to myself, if I can make this much of a difference with my skills, that this impact can affect the cancer center here in our own hospital, right here in the Hampton Roads area. What else can I do? And it was almost challenging. Year two, I remember thinking, should I just throw everything else away? Because I love doing this way more than I love doing the money stuff. It was so powerful. It's the selfishness of the act of giving. It's so much more enlightening and fulfilling than anything else that you feel, even though you're doing something that's going to originate a prosperous life for your family or freedom. That mentality of empowering others is so important. And
Yeah.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I'm not a big fan of look, I like nice things. Don't get me wrong. I like a nice dinner. I like a nice bottle of wine, but lavishness and overdoing things has always been something that makes me a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, I agree. Especially when you become a parent and you realize how high and how important the stakes are for kids who are just going through a lot, and then the ramifications that has for family. Like, yeah, me too. Like if I'm if I'm hopping on a flight for 14 hours and I've got to jump off and go straight to a corporate speaking engagement, then yes, I would much rather be at the front of the plane than than the back of the plane. I like nice things too. So I think it's on all of us to be able to maximize our potential so we can bring in more financial resources so we can end a lot of these things in the world.
Yeah, when I was when my kids were about your kids' age, my oldest son and my youngest son, we decided to put them in bunk beds in one room. Now, we had this huge house with, 4,500 square feet, and they had their own bedrooms. We had a guest bedroom and another bedroom downstairs, and we put them in one bedroom. And I remember my wife saying, "Look, we don't need to do this." And I said, "No, they're going to grow up and they're going to have this challenge of of fighting with each other and, competing with each other. But at the end of every night, they're gonna love each other, because at night when you go to bed, like, just think about your best conversations when you were a kid. Like, someone would spend the night and you'd be talking till like 1 in the morning about nothing. Or, my uncle comes over still to this day, and he's in his 60s, and we stay up till 1 in the morning just chatting because it's fun. So I would tuck them in every night, and my son was probably 4 or 5, and my other son was 2. And we're talking, to my oldest son goes, "Dad, would you be rich if you didn't have us?" And my immediate response was, "Of course. I mean, like, I mean, let's be honest. Like, that's my immediate response was, well, I mean, I would definitely be more financially, secure, son. But I didn't say that. I said, buddy, if you're talking about money, I might have more money, but I would have nothing compared to what I have. This is my favorite part of my life. It's always going to be the favorite part of my life. Even as they get older, it's my favorite part. Today, I liked and commented on an Instagram post of my oldest son, and he texted me and said, "Why'd you have to comment?" So I deleted my comment, and I still love that. And I said, "I'm your dad." He goes, "You said looking good, Danner." I said, "You were looking good. I used our last name. I was being honest. I'm your father." And then I responded back with, "Son, at the end of the day, caring about what other people think is our greatest weakness.
Yeah.
I love you. I'm celebrating you. I'll delete it because it makes you uncomfortable, but take that lesson." Anyway, the rich comment was the point, and that is, like, so powerful. And I walked out of that room, and I will never forget the way I felt, because it was a reshuffling of my own brain to remind myself of what I was actually doing every day, not
Yeah.
just building financial stability.
Yeah, and temporary embarrassment for your son, but knowing deep down that he has unconditional love, I think is a pretty good trade off. Every time I walk my daughter to school, 5 years old, I often say this to her. We hold hands, and I say to her, one day you might not want to do this, and she can't wrap her head around why that might be the case. And yeah, just enjoying those moments is so important.
It is powerful. I mean, having 2 sons, your snuggle time goes away pretty quick. So, the challenge is dad's a physical touch kind of person, and so it
Yeah.
is kinda like you gotta now it's about wrestling when you can get a couple punches in, and then they get bigger than you, and it gets even more uncomfortable. I actually have to try now. So, that's it's
Yeah,
hard.
I'm a physical touch. I'm a very affectionate guy as well. My wife, not so much. She doesn't want all the physical attention, but family hugs are the best. And yeah, it's really nice. I was laughing about your bunk bed story before because every single day our kids are talking to us about the bunk beds. But it could be a reality TV show. The mischief that these two would get up to at the moment. But yes, one day I think we'll give it a try.
It's worth it. It's worth it. All I know is I have a sister and a brother. My sister and I are 22 months apart. My younger brother is almost 14 years younger than me. My sister and I grew up in an environment where it was constant competition. We're completely different in those regards. We love each other. We would die for each other. But growing up, it was a challenge comparatively. And I remember thinking, man, if we were just in the same room every night, we would have had such a different conversation going. And so brothers, sisters, brothers, whatever, I think that time is a special time. And it's also a time, a lot of times, you don't have the energy to give them the way they want it. Like, they want all your energy right as you're ready to go to bed. And it is the hardest time, even though it's the best. I recorded one conversation. You fly a lot, so you'll relate to this. And when I'm flying and we get delayed, my coping mechanism is, obviously I can't control it. We're on the runway. I was sitting for an hour. I go into old videos and pictures of my kids and family. And I have one video that I recorded, just only one. I don't know why I only did one, but I did one. And it's my boys talking at the end of the night. And we're talking about Elfie, which is our elf on the shelf. And my oldest is saying, "Can he really see us?" And then my youngest is like, "Is he looking at us when we go to the bathroom?" And then And then my oldest is like, he's not weird. And they're having this whole conversation, and it's just hilarious. And it's also a great reminder that, like, just life is so fun and so fast. And in those moments when you're sitting on the plane, you're so angry and so frustrated. Not really. I mean, because once you fly a lot, you're not really angry. You're like, okay, it is what it is. But it's them that kind of help bring you back into the world, which I think is super fun. So
Yeah.
record more of their conversations as you can, if you little pointer, because it'll be so worth it later in life.
Yeah. I love it.
I have a question for you because I think it's pertinent as we come to a wrap up here shortly. Um, Culturally, there's this hustle culture, and you've had a lot of great guests that I think have covered these topics, but sometimes the hustle culture and the balance of life get in the way of each other. How do you look at that, the hustle culture of today and this seeking of life's balance, and maybe the generational discrepancies between the two? Because I think the younger at ages have a little bit of a easier time with the balance, and the older hustle, the Gen X, et cetera, is struggling a little bit with that.
Mm. Yeah. When you win, every team that you're on wins. Like when you strengthen yourself, every team that you're a part of is strengthened because of that. Just as if you lose, every team that you're on loses. So if you're finding yourself losing at work because you're feeling in burnout, then guess what? Your marriage is going to suffer as a result of that. Your relationship with your kids is going to suffer as a result of that. So the work I do with a lot of these companies is they're all about company performance, which I get. Like I get that. It's really, really important. But a company is a collection of teams, and each team is a collection of individuals. So, how do I help them with company performance? It's by caring about the individual first, by embedding the win the day mentality into the DNA of their organization. And if they can care about the individual first, meaning that if the person is giving more to work, they're not taking away from home, or if they're giving more to home, they're not taking away from work, and initiating conversations that need to be had and leading by example. That is not only the best way to care about the individual and strengthen families and marriages, but it's also the best way to improve company performance. So that's what I'm trying to deliver.
I love that. Yeah, it's so funny how many times that you'll have a conversation as a leader of a company, and you'll say, someone will come to you and they'll say, this is a big challenge at work. I'm not getting what I need out of work. And, I just don't feel supported. And you start talking to them and you find out that it has nothing to do with work at all. It has everything to do with their personal life or their relationship or something that's outside. But work is the easy outlet to be able to find as the culprit. But if we could help unify their goals, it's a lot easier. So a lot of companies are very blessed to have someone like you coming in and teaching them.
Yeah.
James, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, and really like just touching on that in terms of mental health, like I'm getting way too many messages from people who have lost that battle with mental health. It really is what drives the impact that I want to have now, is to avoid that. You and I have spoken a lot about what it's like to be a parent and how that changes your mindset and the impact that you want to have. That for mental health, I think, is such a big one, because someone in a moment of weakness makes a decision that has massive, serious ramifications for generations to come. It's very, very difficult. So even in these situations, there might be a high performing executive who might be struggling with the relationship with their kids, marriage, health issue. There's so many different ways that people can be struggling, substance abuse. So really just starting to connect people, to bond them more as friends. And when you can do that, then I think we're gonna raise every team.
Well, I think if they're using the Day One app and they're following your morning journaling, it may also be a way to recognize some of the things they're grateful for, some of the things that can help pull us out of some of the challenges that are easy to fall into if our brain gets consumed with the wrong things. So,
Yeah,
y-
exactly. It's actually it's why I created the win method. I've sort of steered clear from saying that if you do this, it would have prevented, that tragic thing from having happened. But my way of contributing to solve the mental health epidemic is through all of this stuff that I'm doing with the win method and win the day.
so is that the impact part of your work? Is that where you put most of the effort when it comes to impact? Is really creating one person at a time that's finding a better way and a path to success versus depression, anxiety, and challenge.
Yeah, it really is. Like, if what is the value to someone of saving a marriage or saving a relationship that you have with your kids? Like the company performance, yeah, of course, it's very, very important. But at the end of the day, it's what does that company performance enable? So that's really the impact that I want to have.
So James, how do people find you if they want to get your now they can potentially go to UVA and see you speak if they're in Virginia here because that's only 2.5 hours away from us here. So that's pretty
Oh no,
close.
it's a
I go to
tough place
Charlotte.
to get to. Yeah, Wise County, Virginia is it's a tough place for me to get to in LA just because it's a
Are
bit
you flying to
um,
Dulles or Reagan or and then driving down? Or are you gonna fly to Charlottesville itself?
going into Charlotte, and then I think is it something called the Tri Cities Airport?
Yeah, Charlottesville. Yeah, yeah. It's the
No, that's
Tri-Cities
Charlottesville.
Airport.
Yeah,
Yeah, Charlottesville. Yeah.
and then it's I
Yeah.
think a 1 hour or thereabouts from there. So I'll be out there for a few days. So if anyone's around, let's hang out and have some fun.
That's awesome. All right. So they find you by what's the best way? Obviously your books are online.
Yeah, my website's jameswitt.com, James Witt with two T's. But yeah, just search for James Whittaker or Win the Day on any of the socials. And yeah, if there's anything at all that I can do to help, just reach out. Happy to support however I can.
Well, listen to his podcast, everybody, because it is a absolute masterclass of great interviews, great conversations, phenomenal humans that are all making a difference. And I'm grateful for having James on the show today. Thanks for joining me.
Scott, I appreciate you having such a great podcast, and thanks very much for having me on.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.